Hello guys and welcome back to Bookish Chaos. I am Shay and today we are going to talk about Fourthwing. This will be Fourthwing Part 1. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe and click the bell button so that you'll be notified every time that I post a video. Let's jump in. Before we start, I am going to let you know now that this is a deep dive review, so this deep dive review will have spoilers. It will be spoilers for Fourthwing. I will try to keep the Iron Flame spoilers out, but if I throw an Iron Flame spoiler in here, I will make sure to warn you first. So, with that being said, here we go. It is a book written by Rebecca who is a romance author first, fantasy author second. This is the first fantasy book she's ever written. And for those of you who are like, this is not good fantasy, remember, A, this is the first fantasy book she's ever written, and B, she wanted this book to be fantasy light for those who've never read a fantasy book before, but want to get into fantasy. So if you have not fallen down the Fourthwing rabbit hole, let me give you a little bit of information about the book. Okay, so she pitched five ideas, to her publisher, and this is the one they picked. So we have beginner fantasy. We start at Basgiath War College, where we have 4 quadrants. They are the writer's quadrant, the scribe quadrant, the healer's quadrant, and the infantry quadrant. We are focused on the writer's quadrant. Obviously, Fourthwing, you can assume dragons. We follow the main character, Violet Sorrengail, who is a 20-year-old entering the quadrant, forced by her mother to enter because she planned her entire life to be a scribe. But her mom, 6 months before it was time to join any of the quadrants, her mom was like, guess what? You're going to be a dragon rider. So the book starts with an inscription before even the first chapter starts, which is, the following text has been faithfully transcribed from Navarian into the modern language by Jacinia Neilwart, curator of the Scribe Quadrant at Basgiath War College. All events are true, and names have been preserved to honor the courage of those fallen. May their souls be commended to Malik. This is fine if you can suspend your disbelief, because this book does have mild smut in it. Therefore, if this is supposed to be a history book transcribed by Jacinia, she also did Violet and Xaden having sex in a history book. You just have to pretend that doesn't exist, or you're not going to have a good time. All right, chapter 1. So all the chapters start with an epigraph. The epigraph for chapter 1 is, a dragon without its rider is a tragedy. A rider without their dragon is dead. Article 1, Section 1, the Dragon Riders Codex. To start with, the Dragon Riders Codex is the rule book for all Dragon Riders. So, conscription day, we start with conscription day is always the deadliest. Now, this is immediately the number one problem for people who don't like these books, because conscription, by definition, is a draft, but the writer's quadrant doesn't take conscripts, but the infantry does. So, yes and no. Technically, the writer's quadrant does not take conscripts. Under normal circumstances, you have to volunteer to be in the writer's quadrant. If you are, what we will come to learn is a marked one, someone, a child of the rebellion that happened 6 years ago. You are conscripted into the writer's quadrant, but that's like kept hush-hush. They just have the everyday normal people believe that they are volunteering for the Death College for funsies. But we are not here to police the general basic grammar and usage of words, because I enjoyed this book immensely. I enjoy this series so far. I'm really excited for January 21st when Onyx Storm comes out. I will not be listening to it that day because I start my new job and I can't listen at my new job. But the weekend after, I am going to do nothing but listen to Onyx Storm until I finish it. Okay, Violet is our female main character, and we open on her carrying her 30-pound pack up the stairs to the general's office. This, we learn, is her mother, Lilith. Most people who enter the writer's quadrant have been training since birth. Violet has been training for 6 months. Her father was training her to be a scribe up until the point that her mother was like, no more. Her dad died a few years ago after her brother died. It's very sad. She comes upon her mother's door, hearing her mother and her sister fighting. And her sister is like, you can't do this. She's going to die. Because Violet has what we in the modern world know as Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or EDS for short. EDS is a connective tissue disorder that can cause your joints to pop out of place or subluxate. As I said, they're fighting about Lilith's decision to put Violet into the Writer's Quadrant. But my favorite takeaway from this is Lilith telling Mira, Violet deals with more pain before lunch than you do in an entire week. If any of my children is capable of surviving the Writer's Quadrant, it's her. That was the moment that I knew that while Lilith is flawed and has a lot of issues, she does care for her children. I would just like that to be known. Before you jump into this, she does care for her children, even if she doesn't show it sometimes, or anytime. So in this scene, we learn that her mother has a signet, and it is storm wielding, and her dragon's name is Imsar. And I am not going to get any of the dragon names correct almost ever, because I don't speak Scottish Gaelic, and Rebecca Yarros decided to use Scottish Gaelic words for the dragon names. We will be diving into dragon names for Theories video, because sometimes I think the dragon names hint towards things about the person that they are going to be bonded with. So, we learned about her mother's signet and her dragon's name, and that their brother is dead, and that their dad died a year later from heart failure. That heart failure is going to be in the Theories video. So, we move to Mira waiting for her in the hallway after Violet kicked her out, and Mira repacks her rucksack, braids her hair, gives her appropriate clothes, and a corset that we learn is filled with scales from her dragon, Tyne. She says that another writer whose signet is to adjust the size of things, yes, they make a dick joke, shrunk Tyne's scales with their signet to shrink them way down so that she could stitch them into a corset, which how strong did that needle have to be to stitch dragon scales? I'm just okay. Logistics. We're not thinking about logistics. They discuss weapons, and Violet tells her that swords are too heavy, but she's pretty fast with daggers. Partially because Violet is small, partially because of the EDS. Before we get too much further in, I'm going to tell you that I love that there is a character that has EDS because my sister has EDS, and it makes me feel like my sister represented in fiction. They argue about the books that Vi has packed because her pack is 30 pounds because it is chock full of books. Mira lets her keep only the book on poisons, even though Violet tries to keep the fable book that their dad gave her. They have a conversation about the fable book where we learn about the venom and their wyvern kept in the fables, which my brain told me to remember because my brain grabs onto anything that the author puts emphasis on, and the fables come up so often. Mira tells her that the other cadets will try to kill her and to sleep in her corset because some of the cadets will not honor the codex, so she is never safe because one of the rules of the codex is that you cannot kill another cadet while they are asleep. Not that anybody actually follows the codex. So they head down to be with the other candidates, and Mira gives her advice while they're walking on the parapet. The parapet is an 18-inch wide bridge, 200 feet in the air. It is made of stone, and it is uneven because the mortar is failing places, and they really need to redo the mortar on this bridge before the whole bridge collapses under people while they're trying to cross it. She tells her to find her childhood best friend Dayton Atos when she gets there. The main college, so from the book, the main college is built into the side of Basguy's Mountain, as if it was cleaved from a ridgeline of the peak itself. The sprawling, formidable structure towers over the crowd of anxious, waiting candidates and their tearful families, with its stories-tall stone battlements built to protect the high-rise of the keep within, and defensive turrets at each of its corners, one of which houses the bells. The majority of the crowd moves to line up at the base of the northern turret. the entrance to the infantry quadrant. Some of the mass heads towards the gate behind us, the healer quadrant, that consumes the southern end of the college. Envy clenches my chest when I spot a few taking the central tunnel into the archives below the fortress to join the scribe quadrant. The entrance to the riders quadrant is nothing more than a fortified door at the base of the tower, just like the infantry entrance to the north, but while the infantry candidates can walk straight into their ground level quadrant, we rider candidates will climb. They will climb 200 feet into the air. Mira warns her not to mess around with people outside of her year. You don't want anybody thinking that you slept your way to the top, kind of a thing. They see a boy, and Mira tells her that the kid with the black mark on him is a separatist kid, that it's a relic from the rebellion. Mira says, from the book, Mom says General Melgren's dragon did it to all of them when he executed their parents, but she wasn't exactly open to further discussion on the topic. Nothing like punishing the kids to deter more parents from committing treason. She also states that Xaden Ryerson will try to kill Violet, so she needs to stay away from her. And anytime that someone tells you to stay away from someone in a fantasy book or a fictional book at all, you're obviously not going to do that. Most of Navarre's 6 provinces have sent this year's share of candidates. Everybody has to pass the entrance exam, and certain, like the infantry and the riders quadrant, have to pass an agility test that Violet is confused about how she was able to pass. She meets a girl named Rhiannon and a boy named Dylan, and they talk about their history while they're in line, and she describes Rhi as a woman with a full pack whose high cheekbones and oval face remind me of renderings of Amari, the queen of the gods. Her dark brown hair is worn in several rows of short braids that just touch the equally dark skin of her neck. The second person that they run into is a muscular blonde man with the woman crying all over him. He's carrying an even bigger rucksack. So she's like, oh my god, all these people can carry way bigger rucksacks than me. I'm going to die. Mira tells her, don't die. I would hate to be an only child. And then she leaves. So Rhi and Dylan and her step up and they give their names. Violet tells Rhi to trade a boot with her because she notices that that Rhi's boots are smooth. And Mira gave Violet rider's boots, which have grip and tread and traction. So they agree to trade boots. And then I wrote in my notes, hello, beginning of a best friendship. Violet sees a man who gets paragraphs of vague description. But the fact that he gets paragraphs of description is how I knew that he was the love interest. Ready for this? He's tall, with wind black blown hair and dark brows. The line of his jaw is strong and covered by warm, tawny skin and dark stubble. For everybody, we're interrupting the passage to remind everybody, especially the people who make fan art of Xaden Ryerson is not white. He is not white. I picture him Persian, like that color of tawny skin. Anyway, dark stubble. And when he folds his arms across his torso, the muscles in his chest and arms ripple, moving in a way that makes me swallow. And his eyes are the shade of gold-flecked onyx. The contrast is startling, jaw-dropping even. Everything about him is. His features are so harsh that they look carved, and yet they're astonishingly perfect. Like an artist worked a lifetime sculpting him, and at least a year of that was spent on his mouth. He's the most exquisite man I've ever seen. Even the diagonal scar that bisects his left eyebrow and marks the top corner of his cheek only makes him hotter, flaming hot, scorching hot, gets you into trouble and you like it level of hot. Suddenly, I can't remember exactly why Mira told me not to fuck around outside of my year group. Ready for the next one, Ryerson? The rider with ripped sleeves says, Xaden Ryerson. You ready for this, Sorengale? Rhiannon asks, moving forward. Sorengale. He steps toward me, and I look up and up and up. And then I wrote, don't get me started on the fact that she wrote, he has to be more than 4 inches over 6 feet tall. Just say he's taller than 6'4". They have a whole back and forth where he says, your mother captured my father and oversaw his execution. And she says, your father killed my older brother. Seems like we're even. And he's like, hardly. So she gets ready to go. They are she's getting ready to step up behind Ree, and Dylan falls off the parapet. So our little friend Dylan, who entered the chat, who was a sweet, sweet boy, who had a ring to propose to his girlfriend after he survived the Riders Quadrant, falls off the parapet to his death. Chapter 2. It starts with, there's a misconception that it's kill or be killed in the Riders Quadrant. Riders, as a whole, aren't out to assassinate other cadets, unless there's a shortage of dragons that year or a cadet that is a liability to their wing. Then things may get interesting. Major Offendra's Guide to the Riders Quadrant, unauthorized edition. She starts with, I will not die today, which becomes her forever mantra, and I'm super into it. Just saying. I love it. Every time she says, I will not die today, I'm so here for it. She's heading across, and the way the author chose to world build is to have her nervous tell, the thing that she does to keep herself calm is use her scribe brain and spew knowledge that she has just locked in her brain, which is how we get to know things about the world. So, from her spewing and from the book, we get, the continent is home to 2 kingdoms, and we've been at war for 400 years. Navarre, my home, is the largest kingdom, with 6 unique provinces. Tyrrendor, our southernmost and largest province, shares its border with the province of Krovla, within the Poramil kingdom. To our east lie the remaining 2 Poramil provinces of Breivik and Signisen, with the Espen Mountains providing a natural border beyond. Beyond Krovla, beyond our enemy, lies the distant Barrens, a desert, and then we get her traveling. The entire time that we're getting this, just know that she is working her way across the parapet. Within Navarre, Tyrrendor was the last of the bordering provinces to join the alliance and swear fealty to King Reginald. It is also the only province to attempt secession 627 years later, which would have eventually left our kingdom defenseless had they been successful. The kingdom of Poramil mainly consists of arable plains and marshlands, and is known for exceptional textiles, endless fields of grain, and unique crystalline gems capable of amplifying minor magics. I need you to remember that in the next book. Which is one thing I like. If you casually mention just something off the wall in the beginning of one book and then it comes back later in the second book, I'm here for it. Back to our read from the book. In contrast, Navarre's mountainous regions offer an abundance in ore, hardy timber from our eastern provinces, and limitless deer and elk. The trade agreement of Resin, signed more than 200 years ago, ensures the exchange of meat and lumber from Navarre for the cloth and agriculture within Poramil 4 times a year at the Afthabeen outpost on the border of Krovla and Tyrrendor. So this is all just her making it halfway across the parapet. Partway across, the guy that was behind her, that we did not really meet, but we met him. It was not important. We hate him. His name is Jack. She notices that he stops walking and turns away from her and throws the kid behind him off the parapet and then heads for Violet, which sucks. He's like, I'm coming for you, Soren Gale, and she's like, shit, and she starts running. And we get Tyrrendor encompasses the southwest of the continent, made up by hostile mountainous terrain and bordered by the Emerald Sea to the west and the Arctile Ocean to the south. Tyrrendor is nearly impenetrable, though separated geographically by the cliffs of Draelor, a natural protective barrier. She hurries and makes it to the other side, jumps down, whirls around as he comes after her and puts a dagger to his balls. We get to have some fun commentary from the older cadets around them. They say things like, the female cadet says, we get some fun commentary from the older cadets. And Violet says to Jack, I think I'll be safe for right now. So she's like, between her breaths, so she's like, I think I'll be safe for now. Because he's like, I'm gonna kill you. He vibrates with rage and says, will you? And she states from the Codex, it is unlawful for a rider to cause another harm while in a quadrant formation or in the supervisory presence of a superior ranking cadet. And there are, in fact, superior ranking cadets standing behind them. The male rider says, well, Jack, this is ridiculous. Cadet Sorengale has you by the actual balls here in more of the ways than one. She's right. Regs state that there's nothing but respect among riders at formation. You want to kill her, you'll have to do it in the sparring ring or on your own time. That is, if she decides to let you off the parapet, because technically you're not on the grounds yet, so you're not a cadet, she is. Chapter 3 starts with the epigraph. Blue dragons descend from the extraordinary Gormphalius line. Known for their formidable size, they are the most ruthless, especially in the case of the rare blue daggertail, whose knife-like spikes at the tip of their tail can disembowel an enemy with just one flick. Colonel Kaori's Field Guide to Dragonkind. Now, I didn't say this at the beginning, so I'm going to say it now. Epigraphs at the beginning of the chapters always hint to something happening in that chapter. So she finds Ree after she gets across and Jack leaves her alone, and they celebrate, both being alive. They're giving each other a hug, and then she hears Violet, and strong hands catch her elbows to steady her, and she looks up at a pair of familiar, striking brown eyes, flared in obvious shock. That is what we get. So, I want you to remember how long the paragraphs about Xaden were. This is what we get about Dane. He seems taller than he was last summer. The beard that cuts across his jaw is new, and he's filled out in a way that makes me blink. Or maybe that's just my vision going hazy at the edges. The beautiful, easygoing smile that starred in way too many of my fantasies is far from the scowl that purses his mouth, and everything about him seems a little harder, but it works for him. The line of his chin, the set of his brow, even the muscles of his biceps are rigid under my fingers as I try to find my balance. Sometime in the last year, Dane Atos went from attractive and cute to gorgeous. So that's all we get about Dane. Just saying. They have a back and forth where he tries to get her to leave and go to the scribe corner over and over and over and over again. He tells Ree to go find the redhead and tell her that she and Vi are going to be in his squad, that he is second squad, flame section, second wing. The girls switch boots, and then he takes Violet to his room, and they sneak up to his room because, she's not supposed to be in there. And he rewraps her knees. They talk about stuff. He wraps her knee because it popped out of place when she fell on the parapet, and she sees a book of language that she gave him last year. And we learn that he is gifted at languages. And they talk about how she ended up here. She said that her mom told her that every Sorengale is a writer. So that will come up in theory video. He tries again and again and again to convince her and yells at her about all the reasons she will die if she stays in the writer's quadrant. And she's like, then why did you have me put in your squad? And he's like, because I needed to get her away from you so that I could get you out of here. And she's like, no, I'm not leaving the quadrant. My mother will just drag me back by my fucking hair and put me back in the writer's quadrant. I can't go to the scribe quadrant where it's safe. I can't do that. So they are in formation, and she gets put in Dane's squad, as we talked about. When Xaden walks into the courtyard, she describes him like a shark, and they're all fish, giving him a wide berth. We learned that 67 candidates died on the parapet today, 301 lived. Sections, and so they're discussing sections and squads, or they're assigning people. And she tells Ree sections and squads. 3 squads in each section, and 3 sections in each wing. Flame section, tail section, and claw section. Each squad has 15 to 16 people in it. Xaden talks to their wing leader, and their entire squad is moved fourth wing. They switch. Dane is pissed. She is pissed. Ree is like, what the fuck is happening? Xaden steps forward, gives a rah-rah speech, and he says, you're on the way to becoming the elite, the few, the chosen. And I wrote, the few, the proud, the Marines. Can you tell that Rebecca Yarros is a milspouse? They hear a roar, and it's wings. And all the wing leaders' dragons and leadership's dragons land on the wall. And Scale, Xaden's blue dagger tail, blows steam in Violet's face. So, if you remember, the epigraph at the beginning of this chapter was about blue dagger tails. There's our blue dagger tail. We learn that the dragons bond humans to protect the Vale, where their hatching grounds are, because the wards protect the Vale. Someone breaks off at a run, gets fried, 68 dead, 300 left, 2 more screams, 70 deaths, 298 cadets, they're cadets now, left in first year. Chapter 4. The sparring ring is where riders are made or broken. After all, no respectable dragon would choose a rider who cannot defend themselves, and no respectable cadet would allow such a threat to the wing to continue training. Major Offender's Guide to the Rider's Quadrant, unauthorized edition. We open and they're reading the death roll like they do every single morning. The death roll is the only memorial that the dead will get. Captain Fitzgibbons closes with, "We commend their souls to Malek." And this is where you learn the god of death's name. Dane releases them to go to their classes. Sawyer, who they learn is a repeat in their squad, he was a first year last year, didn't bond a dragon, got the chance to try it again. Leads them away, and they will be training in the sparring ring today, and Violet thinks about how they will train to eventually, in 2 months, have threshing when they get a dragon, if they don't die. Ree comments on how it must be hard to repeat year 1, and Ridoc, the smartass and the love of my life, says better than being dead, and I don't disagree with Ridoc. Dane sneakily bird whistles her as they're walking away, so she goes and asks him and runs over to him. She asks him what his signet power is, and we learn here that signets are the power you get when a dragon bonds with you. We learn that a signet, so a dragon will channel magic, channel their power to you, and then it manifests in your body based on who you are as a person and what you need in your life. And sometimes if there's no need, you get an elemental signet like Ridoc. Yes, because Sawyer's a metallurgist. Ridoc will eventually get the power of ice. Dane tells her that he can read a person's most recent memories, but he has to put hands on them. He shows her his classified signet patch. They think they're being discreet until Xaden sees them and brings it to attention, and she's like, "I should run, right?" And he's like, "Run, Violet!" And Xaden is like, I already knew your parents are tight, but do you have to be so fucking obvious? Chapter 5. Epigraph is, knowing I'm in direct disagreement with General Melgren's orders, I am officially objecting to the plan set forth in today's briefing. It is not this general's opinion that the children of the rebellion's leaders should be forced to witness their parents' executions. No child should watch their parents put to death. The Tirish Rebellion, an official brief for King Towery by General Lilith Sorengale. So, we open Chapter 5 with us being in the first battle brief. Battle brief is where they learn battle strategy and things like that. It is the only class that all of the years have, and so it's like a sunken down in stage, and then it starts with like first years directly around it, and then it rises like in a circular room, and then the seats rise up, and so it's like first years, second years, third years, all the way up at the top. So, which we learn in the next one. Now there is currently standing room only for the third years because there's so many first years, but that will change. Professor De Vera is their battle brief. Mom can't talk today. Professor De Vera is their battle brief. Professor, she says, you need to understand the politics of our enemies, the strategies of defending our outposts from constant attack, and have a thorough knowledge of both recent and current battles. If you cannot grasp these basic topics, then you have no business on the back of a dragon. She scratches a black brow a few shades darker than her deep brown skin. This is the only class you will have every day because it's the only class that will matter if you're called into service early. She looks at them. She pauses. She looks at everybody. She pauses on Violet. Her eyes widen for just a heartbeat. She gives her an approving smile and a nod, and then she moves on. Because this class is taught every day and relies on the most current information, you will also answer to Professor Markham, who deserves nothing but your utmost respect. Professor Markham is the scribe curator, and Violet was supposed to be his star pupil. And he does not smile at her when De Vera points him out. He looks shocked and disappointed. First years are expected to ask questions first when they open it up to the older years after the first years. So in this battle brief, we learn dragons aren't the only animals capable of channeling power to their riders. Griffins from Poor Meal also share the ability, but the dragons are the only ones capable of powering wards, and that makes all other magics inside of the wards impossible to use. Griffins also can't fly as high as dragons. Mountain rangers are helpful in keeping them and their riders away because griffins can't handle altitude. So they're discussing a battle, and Violet has Rhea ask about the elevation of the attack. Markham answers a little less than 10,000 feet, to which Violet ends up answering griffins aren't as strong as that at that altitude, and neither is their ability to channel. It's an illogical place for them to attack unless they knew the wards would fail. The class continues, and then we head into the sparring room for assessment day. We watch how our squad does, and then Violet is paired with Imogen, the pink-haired second year, with a rebellion relic, who I love also. Give me Ridoc and Imogen for the rest of my life, and I would be happy. My husband is aware. Imogen is hella pissed and says, "You bitch, your mother murdered my family." And I mean, technically, General Melgren's dragon murdered her family, but her mom is responsible for rounding up all of the rebels so that they could be murdered by General Melgren's dragon. So they start fighting, and Dane tells Imogen not to use magic, and she tries to sneakily stab Violet, but she can't because of the dragon scale armor. She fights some more until Imogen violently pops Violet's shoulder out of place because Violet refused to yield while they were fighting. Chapter 6. Chapter 6 epigraph is, "It is my opinion that of all signet powers writers provide, mending is the most precious, but we cannot allow ourselves to become complacent when in the company of such a signet. For menders are rare, and the wounded are not." Major Frederick's Modern Guide for Healers. This one is literally, this epigraph is literally just here because we meet a mender. Dane carries Violet out of the sparring gym and into the healer's quadrant, and Violet tells him that he just revealed that he cares about her in front of everybody. And he's like, "I do care about you." And she's like, "And now everybody knows, you idiot." She doesn't say that, but I say that. So when we get there, we meet Winifred, who is a healer, and her husband Nolan, who is a dragon rider, and he is a mender. Menders are dragon riders. I wrote, healers are not. Winifred gives her a painkiller, and she's trying to have a conversation with them while the painkiller kicks in, as Dane is trying to talk Nolan into not healing her, so that way, if she has a fucked up shoulder, she can't be a dragon rider, therefore she can go to the scribe quadrant, and her mom can't do anything about it. And she's trying to argue with him as the painkiller's kicking in, and she's like slurring her words, and Rebecca Soler, while I have a few qualms about the way she narrates, she does a really good job at pretending to slur her words. But Nolan listens to Violet, mends her, just this once, she tells him, and she will be in a sling for a while. Chapter break. She is getting back to where they sleep, and she finds a note on top of a journal on her bunk. It's a note from Mira telling her that this is a book that their dead brother Brennan wrote for her that she used that helped her get through the writer's quadrant. Rhea asks what it is, and Violet tells her reluctantly, to which Rhea tells her, "We don't burn everything either, like they are supposed to for the god Malik, the god of death." She starts to read it, and she learns where they keep the board with those who they will be fighting, which helps Violet, and that gives her 2 weeks to get everything she needs to survive sparring. Chapter 7. Epigraph. "In the best interest of preserving peace within Navarre, no more than 3 cadets carrying rebellion relics may be assigned to any squad of any quadrant. Addendum 5.2, Basgiath War College Code of Conduct, in addition to last year's changes. Marked ones assembling in groups of 3 or more will now be considered an act of seditious conspiracy and is hereby a capital offense. Addendum 5.3, Basgiath War College Code of Conduct." We open up on Violet sneaking down to the river. She is going down to the river to collect some Fonnelly berries from a tree. Why you gotta be the biggest pain in the butt? You are the biggest pain in the butt. You are big pain in the butt. You are. Okay, Violet is sneaking down to the tree, so she collects the Fonnelly berries, and she is in the tree thinking about climbing down when she sees 2 people appear. It is Xaden and Imogen. And then she realizes that there is more coming, and that there is way more than 3 kids, and she realizes there is about 2 dozen, I think, and they all have rebellion relics, so that's super fun. But she realizes that they are just getting advice from Xaden and the older rebellion kids, and that they're not actually doing anything wrong. Here we meet Garrick, Xaden's second, and Bodhi, his cousin, and we get the reemergence of Imogen. Violet hides around the side of the tree, cloaking herself in shadow. That, or our shadow daddy Xaden, which we learn here that Xaden's signet power is shadows, is cloaking her to keep her hidden. I think that he is cloaking her because he knows she's there because he has shadows. We also meet Liam Mari for the first time here. P.S. We love Liam. He is the sweetest boy on the face of the planet. She's debating on telling Dane that she saw them, but she decides not to because they aren't doing anything wrong. They're just giving advice on how to survive. She does overhear. Now, someone give me a problem I can actually solve. Xaden orders. Battle brief. A first year I recognize says softly, her bunk is only a few rows away from Rhiannon's and mine. Shit, what is her name? There are too many women on the hall to know everyone. But I'm certain she's in third wing. It's not that I can't keep up, but the information, she shrugs. That's a tough one, Imogen responds, turning to look at Xaden. Her profile in the moonlight is almost unrecognizable as the same person who shredded my shoulder. That Imogen is cruel and vicious even. But the way she's looking at Xaden softens her eyes, her mouth, her whole posture, as she tucks a short strand of pink hair behind her ear. I don't know why I added all that in there. You learn what they teach you, Xaden says to the first year, his voice taking a hard edge. Keep what you know, but recite whatever they tell you to. My brow furrows. What the hell does he mean by that? Battle Brief is one of the classes taught by scribes to keep the quadrant up to date on all non-classified troop movements. The battle lines, the only things we're asked to recite are recent events and general knowledge of what's going on near the front lines. Imogen wants to kill Violet, but he says she is his. You're not killing her. And we get, her mom is responsible for the capture of nearly all our parents, Garrick counters, folding his arms over his wide chest. Not her daughter. Punishing children for the sins of their parents is the Navarian way, not the Tirish. So when she thinks she's alone, she gets down and she hears scream and you die. Her stomach plummets as the elbow that catches her is replaced by the sharp bite of a dagger at her throat. Xaden says, fucking Soaring Gale. He yanks back her hood and she says, how do you know? And he says, it's like a whole thing where she's like, let me guess, you could smell my perfume. And he's like, I command shadows, but yeah, let's go with I could smell your perfume, you idiot. She tells him, all right, if you're going to kill me, do it. And he's like, no. And so she throws some daggers at him, and he's like, you missed. And she's like, back up. And so he does. And she intentionally would have hit him had she wanted to. And he looks at her and says, you look all frail and breakable, but you're really a violent little thing, aren't you? Which pisses her off, but I love it. And he asks if she's going to tell, and she says no. And she says no, that he's just trying to help. And she thinks, he looks at me like he's trying to see through me, and ice prickles my scalp. And we get a wonderful ending to the chapter where he starts to walk away, and she goes, you're not going to handle me? I call after him, shock raising my brows. Not tonight. He tosses over his shoulder. I scoff. What are you waiting for? He responds with, it's no fun if you expect it, striding into the darkness. Now get back to bed before your wing leader realizes you're out after curfew. And she goes, what? You're my wing leader. But he's already disappeared into the shadows, leaving her to talk to herself like a fool. He didn't ask her what was in her satchel, and she smiles, tucks her arm back into her sling, sighing with relief as the weight is taking off her shoulder. She thinks I'm a fool with fawnily berries. Chapter 8. Epigraph. There is an art to poison, not often discussed, and that is timing. Only a master can properly dose and administer for effective onset. One must take into account the mass of the individual, as well as the method of delivery, effective uses of wild and cultivated herbs, by Captain Lawrence Medina. All right, she wakes up and sees that Rhea's already gone and is happy that at least someone is getting laid. She thinks about how squad leaders don't really care about curfew except Dane, because Dane cares about all the rules. Dane is waiting for her outside of the dormitory to escort her to her breakfast duty. And he asks why she picked breakfast duty, and she doesn't tell him the real reason why, but she's like, I'm used to waking up early from practicing to be a scribe. He does not know that she's actually doing it so that she can poison opponents to survive sparring. As they're walking, a door to the right flies open, and it's Rhea. She apologizes, and Vi says hi to Tara, who sticks her head around the corner. And Dane, with a stick up his ass, is like, "We have curfew for a reason, Mateus, and no one is supposed to be in the private dorms until after threshing." And I wrote, ugh, buzzkill. He asks about Violet's sex life, and she thinks she should leave before she does something foolish like make it his business, which barf. It has been 2 weeks, and he is still trying to talk her into going to the scribe quadrant. Chapter break, and we are in dragon class. Professor Kaori is teaching them all about dragons. We get a little bit of information from the book about dragons. Red scorpion tails, like Gron here, are the quickest to temper. Professor Kaori continues, his perfectly trimmed mustache carving as he smiles at the illusion like he's the dragon himself. We all take notes. "So, if you offend him, you're lunch," Ridoc says from her left, and the class laughs. Even Jack Barlow, who hasn't quit glaring at her since his squad took over their quarter of the room half an hour ago, snorts. "Precisely," Professor Kaori responds. "So, what's the best way to approach a red scorpion tail?" He glances around the room. "You don't," Rhiannon mutters, and Violet laughs under her breath. "They prefer that you approach from the left and from the front if possible," a woman from one of the other squads answers. "Excellent," Professor Kaori nods. "For this threshing, there are 3 red scorpion tails willing to bond." The image changes to a different dragon, and we learn that Professor Kaori is an illusionist, and he is showing them unbonded dragons while he tells them all about them and how to approach them, how to stay alive if you encounter one. That is Professor Kaori's job. He is the professor of dragonkind. We learn that there are 100 dragons willing to bond. That is 37, less than last year. The image changes to Sigale, the navy blue dragon bonded to Xaden. "You won't have to worry about how to approach blue dragons since there are none willing to bond this threshing. But you should recognize Sigale if you see her," Professor Kaori says. "So you can fucking run," Ridoc drawls. And Kaori's like, "Yeah." Kaori says she is a blue dagger tail, the rarest of the blues. And yes, if you see her without her bonded rider, you should definitely find somewhere else to be. Ruthless does not begin to describe her, nor does she abide by what we assume to be what dragons consider law. She even bonded the relative of one of her previous riders, which we all know is typically forbidden. But Sigale does whatever she wants, whenever she wants. Jack asks about the only black dragon in the Vale, and Kaori says he is a Morningstar tail. He puts him up on the screen. A Morningstar tail has the bludgeoning power of a club tail, but with spikes on it. And no one has seen him in the last 5 years, and he is not planning on bonding. We learn that they are the smartest and most discerning of the dragons. At this point, they are also the rarest. This black dragon's previous rider, we learn, Naolin's signet was siphoning. Professor Kaori's shoulders fall. He can absorb the power from various sources, other dragons, other riders, and then use it or redistribute it. "What kills someone with that kind of signet?" Jack asks, crossing his arms over his thick chest. Professor Kaori glances at me for a heartbeat before looking away. He attempted to use that power to revive a fallen rider, which didn't work, because there's no signet capable of resurrection, and depleted himself in the process. To use a phrase you'll become accustomed to after threshing, he burned out and died next to that rider. Violet has a weird feeling in her chest that she can't shake, and the bell rings. The squad filters out. She tells Ree that she'll be there in a second, and she walks up to Professor Kaori and she says it was Brennan, wasn't it? I ask Professor Kaori. Sadness fills his gaze as he meets mine. "Yes, he died trying to save your brother. But Brennan was too far gone." So they're talking about dragons. And she is like, "I can't do this, Professor Kaori. They're never going to choose me. They choose for strength, and they choose for shrewdness." And he says they choose for reasons they don't see fit to share with us. He pushes off the desk. "And not all strength is physical, Violet." And then we are at sparring. And Dane tells her he overheard Orin and some of his friends talking about how he needs to kill Violet because Violet's the weakest link, and Jack antagonizes her. Oh, this. While they were under the tree, Xaden is like, "That Barlow kid is a menace, and maybe you need to stand up to him." So Jack antagonizes her, and she throws 2 daggers at him. One nicks his ear, and the other lands an inch beneath his balls. Dane gets all, "Don't do that!" He's like, "I told you to lay low." And then it shows us the parallel between Xaden saying, maybe he would think twice if you threw a few daggers at him, versus how Dane reacts, which is like, stop it. Stay weak. Let me protect you. Pretend you're little and feeble and stop doing that. She thinks he needs to realize that she isn't a liability and she will be harder to kill than Jack thinks. Her scalp prickles and she looks at Xaden, who's looking at her. She gets called up to fight Orin. Violet wins because Orin gets sick. She wins the next week thanks to some lethal Legoral mushrooms. Second week, she wins after some Xena root. Third week, some Tarsilla leaves find their way into her opponent's tea. And the last challenge in August, she wins her 5th dagger thanks to the bark of the Carmine tree. And now we're in early September, and she's happy that she's taken down 5 opponents without killing any of them. I wrote, my, how that will change. But this week, her third wing opponent doesn't show up because she served her the poison pastry too early, and then she hears, I'm happy to step in, and her scalp prickles. Chapter 9! I Will Not Die Today. Violet Soaringale's personal addendum to the Book of Brennan. Data's all, that's not fair. Xaden can't fight her. Xaden's all like, no one asked you, squad leader. And she realizes that she's been lucky in the glares that she gets from Xaden, because the glare that he gives Dane is like way worse. Xaden walks up and he discards every weapon on his body, and there's a lot of them. He gives them to Imogen. She gets jealous of Imogen, and she's like, there's no time to examine that particular oddity. She goes, you don't think you'll need those? I ask, palming my own blades. His chest is massive, wide shoulders, heavily muscled arms alongside. A target this big should be easy to hit. Nope, not when you brought enough for the both of us. A wicked smile curves his mouth. He stretches out his hand, curls his fingers in a come-hither motion. Let's go. She flings the dagger at his chest. He catches it, telling her he's already seen that move. And she thinks, holy shit, he's fast. But she has to be faster. She does a combo that retaught her. He anticipates that. He catches her leg, dropping her to the ground. She tries to go for his thigh. He blocks her strike. We get another back and forth, which is, going for blood today, are we, Violence? He whispers. Metal hits the mat again, and he kicks it past my head and out of my reach. He's not taking my daggers to use them against me. He's disarming me just to prove he can. My blood boils. My name is Violet, I seethe. I think my version fits you better. He releases my wrist and stands, offering me a hand. We're not done yet. She takes his hand, which is a bad idea, because then he just continues to whoop her ass. More of him taking her blades. Every time he takes one, he slides it across the floor to Dane, who, to make more of a point, and Dane is just slowly getting more mad. He quietly warns her not to trust anyone she faces on the mat, and he's saying it so that only she can hear it. And so she whispers back, even someone who owes me a favor, because under the tree, he told her, I will give you a favor. He tells her that he's the one who will be granting that favor. More fighting, and then he slams her into the ground again, pinning her to the ground with his hips, not putting any weight on her from his POV chapter. We get that he is very aware of her limitations, and he's being kind while also making his point. So there are 3 bonus Xaden chapters. I will do a video comparing the bonus chapters to the regular chapters. So there's a chapter 9, a chapter 14, and a chapter 27, I believe, of Fourthwing, but in Xaden's POV. He leans close to her ear and whispers that taking out her enemies before they fight is a good idea. Is smart. It's really smart. But 1, don't be so obvious about it. And 2, you're not going to have time while you're on the front lines to poison your opponent before you have to fight them. And also, he says, if you aren't testing yourself in here, and he scrapes the dagger down her neck but doesn't, cut her, he's like, you're not going to get any better. She says, you'd rather I die, no doubt. And he says, and be denied the pleasure of your company? He mocks. She says, I fucking hate you. He says, that doesn't make you special. The pressure releases from her chest and arm as he gets to his feet, kicking both of the daggers towards Dane. 2 more. She only has 2 left. She gains her feet, and his smile curves into an approving smile. She can be taught, he says. She's a quick learner, I retort. That remains to be seen. He backs up 2 steps, putting a little space between us before crooking his fingers at me again. You've made your damn point, I snap loud enough that I hear Imogen gasp. Trust me, I've barely gotten started. He folds his arm and leans back on his heels, clearly waiting for me to move. I don't think I just act, going low and kicking out the backs of my knees. He goes down like a tree, the sound more satisfying, and I pounce. From the bonus chapter, we learn that he's admiring her body, and that's the only reason that she gets to jump on him. And I wrote, we have another read because I'm not doing a very good job of describing the chemistry they have. So he is on top of her. She goes for his shoulder. He squeezes her wrist and pins it above her head. Heat rises up my neck and flames lick my cheeks as he lowers his face. His lips are only inches away from mine. I can make out every speck of gold in his onyx eyes, every bump and ridge of his scar. Beautiful fucking asshole. My breath catches and my body warms. The traitorous bitch. You're not attracted to toxic men, I remind myself, and yet here I am, getting all attracted. I have been since the first second I saw him, and I feel, if I'm being honest, he pushes his fingers into my fist, forcing it open, and then he sends the blade skittering across the mat before letting go of my wrist. Get your dagger, he orders. What? My eyes fly open. He has me defenseless and in a kill position already. Get your dagger. Fire races along my skin at the feel of his fingers lacing with mine. Toxic, dangerous. Wants to kill you. Nope, doesn't matter. My pulse still skitters like a teenager. You're tiny. He says it like an insult. Well aware. My eyes narrow. So stop going for bigger moves that expose you. He drags the tip of my dagger down his side. A rib shot would have worked just fine. Then he guides our hands around his back, making himself vulnerable. Kidneys are a good fit from this angle, too. I swallow, refusing to think about other things that are a good fit from this angle. I just did that from memory because I lost sight of where I was on this page. Chances are, if your opponent is in armor, it's weak here. Those are 3 easy places you could have struck before your opponent would have had time to stop you. They're also fatal wounds, and I've avoided those at all costs. Do you hear me? I nod. You're not going to have time to offer tea to some bravey griffin rider when they come at you. She says, how did you know? And my muscles lock, including my thighs, which just happened to still be bracketing his hips. His eyes darken. Oh, violence, you're good, but I've known better poison masters. The trick is not to make it quite so obvious. If you haven't finished this book, wait to read the bonus chapter because Xaden is talking to her about poisons and is thinking about something that will spoil the ending of this book if you read the bonus chapter, which is that Brennan, her brother, is actually still alive, which I knew because of the amount of times that during this book we talk about how Brennan is dead. So I knew that it wasn't true. Okay, later that night, she and Dane are in his room, and he's massaging her shoulders, and they're talking about Xaden, and he's like, he's evil, be careful. She asks him if he thinks Xaden could be plotting against Navarre and still have bonded Sigale, and he says, I did. Before I bonded Kath. Dane is like, I went to leadership. I went to Markham, and I told them that you're in danger. They need to get you out of here. And he uses that Ree told him that Violet found crushed violets on her bed last week, to which she says they were just dead flowers, and he says they were mutilated violets. And of course, they are months into being a cadet, and he's still trying to get her into the scribe quadrant. She is like, you don't think I can do this? And he says, I never said I don't think you can cut it, Violet. And she says, you say it every day. You say it when you walk me from formation to class, which I know makes you late for flight line. You say it when you yell at your wing leader when he takes me to the mat. He had no right. He's my wing leader. I shrug my tunic over my head. He has the right to do whatever he wants, including execute me, and that's why you need to get the hell out of here. Dane laces his fingers behind his neck and begins to pace. I've been watching, Vi. He's just toying with you, like a cat plays with a mouse before the kill. She tells him that she's held her own so far, and he says, except for today when he wiped the mat with you time and time again, or did you miss the part where he took every single weapon you had, so that you knew exactly how defenseless you are and how easy it is to defeat you. She's like, I was there, and she's survived 2 months in this place. And he says, do you know what happens at threshing? And she's like, are you calling me ignorant? And he's like, they throw every first year into the training grounds, the ones you've never been to, and then the second and third years are supposed to watch as you decide which dragons to approach and which to run from. And he's like, While the other riders are watching, the first years are taking out their vendettas and eliminating any liabilities to the wing. And she says, I'm not a damned liability. And he's like, not to me. And he's like, but they don't know you the way I do, Vi. And while the first years, like Barlow and Seifert, are hunting you, we'll have to watch. I'll have to watch you die, Violet. We're not allowed to help, to save you. And then he cups her face and tries to get her to give up, but she won't because she's not a coward. Chapter 10. Epigraph. Don't underestimate the challenge of the gauntlet, Mira. It's designed to test your balance, strength, and agility. The times don't matter for shit, only that you make it to the top. Reach for the ropes when you have to. Coming in last is better than coming in dead. Page 46, the Book of Brennan. All right, we open with, I look up and up and up, fear coiling in my stomach like a snake ready to strike. Well, that's Rhiannon swallows, her head tilted just as far back as mine as we stare at the menacing obstacle course carved into the front of a ridgeline so steep that it might as well be a cliff. The zigzagging death trap of a trail rises above us, climbing in 5 distinct switchbacks of 180-degree turns, each increasing in difficulty on the way to the top of the bluff that divides the citadel from the flight field, and the vale. Picture here. We learn that their squad mate Orly is excited for the gauntlet because her dad used to be a rider before he retired, and he used to build them obstacle courses to run like the gauntlet. There are steps to the flight field, but you don't get the pleasure of using the stairs until after you have bonded with a dragon at threshing. We get a bunch of squad convos, and I fall in love more with Ridoc, and Materio tells them that hand-to-hand will be put on hold for the next 2 weeks while they train for the gauntlet leading up to presentation and threshing. Tynan accuses her, one of her squad mates, accuses her of sleeping with Dane, and everybody else puts him in his place and is like, they're best friends because Daddy Atos has been her mom's advisor for fucking ever. She's like, Dane would more than take a exception to Tynan's assumptions and probably assign him cleanup duty for a month. Good thing he's on the flight field this time of day. Xaden would just beat the shit out of him. And now we start with the comparing of Dane to Xaden in her head. Emma Terrio tells them that the 5 ascents of this course are designed to mimic challenges of battle. Balance to stay on the back of your dragon, strength to hold your seat, and stamina for fighting on the ground and then mounting. Sawyer goes, they watch him complete the gauntlet, having learned it last year, and at the end of it is a big chimney formation that they have to climb up before the ramp. Both of these are used to mimic having to run and climb up your dragon's foreleg. A problem Violet has, especially with the chimney thing, because she's too short and to span from side to side, and she's too short from the ramp because she's barely over 5 feet tall. So she watches her squad climb up. After Sawyer, it goes Pryor, Trina, Tynan, Rhiannon, Ridoc, Violet, and then Luca. We get more info dumping as Violet calms herself, and we learn a little bit about dragon things. Feathertails are the breed we know the least about. This is because feathertails reportedly abhor violence and are not suitable for bonding, though this scholar cannot be certain, as one has never left the Vale within my lifetime. Green dragons, I mutter under my breath, known for their keen intellect, descend from the Honorable Wayne Lloydsig line, and continue to be the most rational of dragon kind, making them the perfect siege weapons, especially in the case of clubtails. Orange dragons come in various shades of apricot to carrot and are the most unpredictable of dragon kind and therefore always a risk. And Orly falls and dies. One less squad mate. Next morning, they are in morning formation, listening to the death roll. The first trial of the gauntlet has made the death roll longer. Chapter break. Violet is taking Orly's pack to burn in the tower, and Dane is with her. She tells Dane she doesn't want him to go with. She can handle it. She's fine. She also tells him that she can't make it up the chimney and we'll have to figure something out before presentation day. She goes to the edge of the turret, throwing her pack in the fire, and she sees the shadows of 3 dragons as they approach. She heads down, and as she's walking through the courtyard, she sees the riders of those dragons are Garrick, Xaden, and Bodhi. She's like, what are they doing? And she overhears. There has to be something more we can do, Bodhi agrees, looking to Xaden, his voice low as they pass by me, their boots crunching on the gravel. We're doing everything we can, Garrick hisses. My scalp prickles and Xaden stops mid-step, 10 feet away. The set of his shoulders rigid. Shit, he knows I'm here. Instead of the usual fear, that spikes in his presence. Only anger rises in my chest. Garrick asks what's wrong, looking over his shoulder in the opposite direction, and Xaden says, go on, I'll meet you inside. Bodhi asks him if he's sure, and he's like, yeah, go. And she says, I know you know I'm here. I force myself to stand and move toward him so he doesn't think I'm hiding or worse, scared of him. And please don't prattle on about commanding the dark. I'm not in the mood tonight. No questions about where I've been. He folds his arm across his chest and studies me in the moonlight. His scar looks even more menacing in this light, and I can't seem to find the energy to be scared. I honestly don't care, I shrug, the movement making the throb in my shoulders intensify. Awesome. Just in time to practice on the gauntlet tomorrow. He cocks his head to the side. You really don't, do you? Nope. It's not like I'm not out after curfew myself. A heavy sigh blows through my lips. What are you doing out after curfew, first year? Debating running away, I retort, how about you? Feel like sharing? I ask mockingly, knowing he's not about to answer me. The same. And he tells her he hasn't decided yet if he wants to kill her or not. They do more flirting, and she is upset at her chances, and she tells him that she can't complete the gauntlet. And he tells her the right way isn't the only way. Chapter 11. It is a grave offense against Malik to keep the belongings of a dead loved one. They belong in the beyond with the god of death and the departed. In the absence of a proper temple, any fire will do. He who does not burn for Malik will be burned by Malik. Major Rorley's Guide to Appeasing the Gods, 2nd edition. Chapter 11 starts with more gauntlet practice. No one dies this time, but presentation is tomorrow. Yay, more death roll. Presentation day morning. Death roll is over, and it's gauntlet time. Imogen says, good luck today. Tucks a strand of her hair and says, hopefully you won't fall short. I love her so much. Ridoc notices that they are the biggest squad as they're on their way to the gauntlet. We learn here there is only 171 first years left. 171 first years, and they started with, after all of the deaths at the first opening, we had 298. There's only 171 left. But there's still only 100 dragons willing to bond. Dane falls back, so he walks between her and Rhee, and he's like, change your mind. And she's like, no. And he's like, change your mind. And she's like, I can't. Any more than you would leave Kath and run to the scribes yourself. And he's like, that's different. I'm a writer. And she's like, well, maybe I am too. So they argue some more, and he asks what's changed between Parapet and now. And she's like, me. An hour later, she's working her way up the gauntlet, and her plan, when she gets to the chimney, is to use the ropes that are next to it to catch herself, and to pull it over and hold it with her hands and use her feet to walk up the chimney. And then when she gets to the ramp, which she's too short for, she runs up as far as she can and then slams her daggers into it and uses them to climb up. She gets up, reaches down, pulls them over, and Amber Mavis, that bitch that we meet at the beginning, that Dane's like, she's a friend. Dane totally fucked her. Anyway, I wrote, Amber Mavis, that bitch Dane fucked last year, is pissed. She is also all the codex says blah blah blah, like Dane is. So we get from the book, she can't do that, someone shouts. Yeah, well, she just did. Ridoc tosses over my shoulder because they're all like in a group hug. Cheating. Cheater, I turned towards the voice. It's Amber Mavis, the strawberry blonde wing leader from 3rd year who was Dane's close friend last year. There's nothing but fury on her face as she charges towards Xaden. Back the hell up, Mavis, Garrick threatens. The sun flashing off the 2 swords, and the curly-haired section leader keeps strapped to his back as he puts his body between Amber and Xaden. The cheater clearly used foreign materials, not once, but twice, Amber yells. It's not to be tolerated. We live by the rules or we die by them. And Violet's like, no wonder her and Dane are friends. Garrick says, I don't take kindly to calling anyone in my section a cheater. Garrick warns her, and my wing leader will handle any rule breaking in his own wing. He moves to the side, and she's met with Amber's glaring blue eyes. Violet says, Sorengale, arching an eyebrow in an obvious challenge, pen poised over the book that he has, and she notices for the first time that other than his fourthwing and wing leader emblems, he doesn't wear patches like everybody else does. She says, I expect a 30-second penalty for using the rope. I answer, my breath steadying. And the knife, Amber's gaze narrows. She's disqualified. When Xaden doesn't answer, she turns a glare on him. Surely she's out. You can't tolerate lawlessness in your own wing, Ryerson. And he's waiting for Violet to respond, so he says nothing. And she says, a rider may only bring to the quadrant the items they can carry. I start, are you quoting the codex to me? Amber shouts. And they shall not be separated from those items no matter what they may be. I continue, for once carried across the parapet, they are considered part of that person. Article 3, Section 6, Addendum B. That addendum was written to make thievery an executional offense. Correct, I nod, looking between her and the onyx eyes that see straight through me. But in doing so, it gave any item carried across the parapet the status of being a part of the rider. I unsheathed the chipped, battered blade with a sharp bite of pain in my palms. This isn't a challenge blade. It's one I carried across, and therefore considered part of my person. She looks at Xaden and says, the right way isn't the only way. Xaden holds her gaze, and he says, she has you, Amber. On a technicality, she still has you. He turns slightly and delivers a look at her that Violet says she never wants directed at her. Amber turns on her and says, you think like a scribe. And it's intended as an insult, but Violet's like, I know. Sorengale, Xaden says, my eyes fly open. You're leaking. His gaze drops pointedly to my hands. Do something about it. So she cuts off the sleeves of her shirt and uses them to bandage her hands because her hands are bleeding. And Ree helps her. And the whole squad made it. Chapter 12, Presentation Day! Epigraph. Presentation Day is unlike any other. The air is ripe with possibilities and possibly the stench of sulfur from a dragon who has been offended. Never look a red in the eye. Never back down from a green. If you show trepidation to a brown, well, just don't. Colonel Kaori's Field Guide to Dragonkind. There are now 169 in the Dragon Riders. Her squad is 11th out of 36 squads to go through Presentation Day. Liam Murray was the first up. Of course he was, because he is the sweetest angel baby who is the strongest. So they are about to walk in front of the dragons. That's what Presentation Day is. You present yourself to the dragons. The dragons are lined up down 2 rows, and you walk like in between the 2 rows of dragons. They are averaging 25 feet tall. They're in formation of their own, lined up several feet back from the path, close enough to pass judgment on us as we walk by. Garrick is sending them into the canyon, and he recommends that they stay 7 feet apart, and Ridoc jokes, in case one of them gets torched. And Garrick's like, yeah, in case one of you gets torched. Luca asks, I heard that there was a feather tail. And Sawyer's like, I memorized all the dragons, and there was not a feather tail. There's only 100 dragons. And Garrick's like, I guess there's just 101 now. They get up to the senior wing leader, and she tells them, single file, and to talk. And Riddick's like, it's a wonderful day for a presentation. And she's like, amongst yourselves. Talk amongst yourselves so that the dragons can get used to who you are as a person so that they can decide if they want to bond you or not. So they start walking. I'm not going into much of them walking in presentation. Violet and Ree talk about folklore and about the wyvern and the venom. Pryor gets burned alive. 2 greens come down, and she thinks to approach a green, lower your eyes in supplication, and wait for their approval. And so they start sniffing and bumping Violet. And like Ree's talking to her, and Riddick's like, oh my god. And Ree's like, Violet? And she's like, I'm fine, I think. And so they're like sniffing her. They're sniffing her chest, and one of them makes her raise her arm so it can sniff her side. One of them sniffs her back, and she realizes that they smell thyme. They smell the dragon scale armor. And so she is like, oh my god, you smell thyme. And one of them looks at her, and she's like, I'm Mira's sister. She collected his dragon scales and wove them into this armor for me. She's like, nobody else knows. And they sniff her again, and she's like, it saved my life before. And they sniff her a couple more times, and they like chortle. And they decide that it's fine because they head back into line. And Lucas starts arguing with Ridoc, and the dragons burn Luca too. Nobody's sad. Ridoc says, guess the dragons think she's insufferable also. And their squad is now down to 6 first years. Violet, Ree, Sawyer, Ridoc, Tynan, and Trina. Chapter 13. Epigraph. There is nothing quite as humbling or as awe-inspiring as witnessing threshing. For those who live through it anyway, Colonel Kaori's field guide to dragonkind. It is October 1st, which is always threshing. Doesn't matter what day of the week it is, threshing is October 1st. Ridoc is throwing up breakfast and Rhea is stretching. Kaori tells them to listen here. Now, there's only 147 of them. So when they walked into presentation day, there was 171. Now there's 147 of them. The dragons were busy burning people yesterday. He says, if a dragon has already selected you, they'll be calling, go with your feelings. Rhea asks Vi if she's chosen who she wants, and Vi's like, no. And Rhea's like, well, I think I want the grain that was closest to me while they were sniffing the hell out of you. And Vi's like, well, you didn't get eaten, so that's a good start. And she's like, Dane tried talking me into a brown. And Rhea's like, Dane lost his vote when he tried talking you into leaving. And we love her. Kaori is telling them if they go in groups, they're more likely to be incinerated than bonded. The scribes have run the statistics. You're better off on your own. A guy says, and what if we aren't chosen by dinner? And he's like, you'll be brought out by a professor or senior leadership. Don't give up and think we've forgotten about you. And while this is happening, Jack is like, you're dying, Violet. And then Oren and Tynan flank his sides, and she's like, so much for squad loyalty. Thanks, Tynan. Rhea's like, be careful, and she's like, you too. And then they hug each other, and Riddick's like, don't die. A couple hours in, Violet has run into 2 greens, a brown, 4 oranges, and a red, and they are all not her dragon, and she begins to worry that she will be one of the unbonded riders. She decides to see if she can see better, so she climbs up a tree, and she notices the little golden dragon. And then she sees Jack and Tynan and Oren headed towards the little golden dragon to kill it. So she's like, fuck. So she, climbs down the tree, falls, hurts herself, runs, climbs down the tree. She's running to the clearing where she saw the golden dragon. She trips and hurts herself, but she gets there and she's like, hey, you have to run. And the golden dragon, looks at her, but, tips its head completely upside down. And the only way that I picture Andarna is, toothless, but golden. So it's toothless, but golden. So she's, trying to convince the Feathertail to leave, and the boys emerge, and the golden dragon growls at them, and Jack is like, I promise to make it quick. I promise to make it painless. And Vi tells it to scorch them, and it just backs up and growls while baring its teeth. Violet steps out and says they can't do this, and Jack is like, perfect, we will take out both the weaklings. And Violet's like, if you can fly, now would be the time. And the dragon just chuffs at her, and she's like, you can't kill a dragon. It's wrong. It's not what we believe in. They all lift their swords, and they hear, I would strongly recommend you rethink your actions. And her scalp prickles, and Xaden is leaning against a tree looking chill as fuck, and behind him is Sigale looking pissed with her fangs exposed. Chapter 14. Epigraph. In 6 centuries of recorded history of dragon and rider, there have been hundreds of known cases where a dragon simply cannot emotionally recover from the loss of their bonded rider. This happens when the bond is particularly strong, and in 3 documented cases has even caused the untimely death of the dragon, Navarre, an unedited history by Colonel Lewis Markham. Fuck that dude. And if we don't rethink our actions, Jack shouts. Xaden looks towards me, and I swear I see his jaw clench, even from this far away. There's nothing you can do, right, wing leader? Jack bellows. Guess he knows the rules, too. It's not me you should worry about, Xaden responds, and looks up, and Sigale's dripping saliva from her mouth, I'm gonna murder you, bitch. She is so she's all right, I guess I'm fighting for this dragon. So she looks down at the golden dragon and is like, hey, would help if you back me up with those claws. And then she's like, paws? You have paws? There's no claws on this little tiny dragon. So, simplifying this fight scene, she throws a dagger at Jack. It stabs him in the shoulder. He falls to his knees. The other 2 come at her. Oren's blade slides off her armor. Jack is whining while ordering the other 2 to kill her, and he runs away because he's a big fucking chicken shit. Tynan jabs at her, cuts her in the arm. She slams her dagger into his side. She whips around. Xaden yells, behind you! As Oren's coming at her, the golden dragon snaps its jaws, and Oren stumbles. Tynan yells, you can't interfere! And Xaden says, no, but I can narrate. And Sigale is chomping at the bit to jump in, and Tynan tells Violet that her arm is shot, and she says, I'm used to functioning in pain. Are you? She moves, and Titan staggers backwards, his head tilting back so far that it's nearly perpendicular with his torso as shade envelops us both as he continues to back away. Chest heaving, my lungs desperate for air, I chance a look over my shoulder to see why Titan's retreating, and my heart lurches into my throat. Standing with the golden one tucked under one enormous, scarred black wing is the biggest dragon I've ever seen in my life. The unbonded black dragon Professor Kaori showed us in class. I don't even come close to reaching its ankle. A growl resonates through its chest, vibrating the ground around me as it lowers its gigantic head, bearing dripping teeth. Fear ripples through every cell in my body as his hot breath blows over me. Step aside, Silver One. A deep, gruff, definitely male voice orders. I blink. Wait, what? Did he just speak to me? Yes, you. Move. There is zero room for argument. She limps to the side. Oh, it's nearly stumbling over Oren's unconscious body. Tynan breaks into a run. Terran burns his ass to death. Whoop, whoop, whoop. He tells her that the enemy, she should end the enemy at her feet. And she's like, I can't kill a defenseless man. And he was like, he would given the chance. And she's like, well, that's not me. And then she's like, there's a whoosh of air. Zayden and Sigale leave. And then he's like, you're bleeding. Stop it. I love Terran. Terran will be your favorite part of this book. She realizes, oh my god, this is my dragon. And he's like, get on my back, bitch. And she's like, okay. So she gets on and he's like, here's my name, here's my line, and then calls her stupid by telling her to call him Terran for short. And they're flying, and she slides across his wing, and then she's in free fall. Chapter 15. Just because you survive threshing. Epigraph. Just because you survive threshing doesn't mean you'll survive the ride to the flight field. Being chosen isn't the only test, and if you can't hold your seat, then you'll fly straight into the ground. Page 50, the Book of Brennan. He catches her, puts her back up in his saddle. And by saddle, I mean it's just like the part of their back where they sit. They talk. He tells her that they have to put on a show. He says, you will not fall. You will trust me. And then he uses his power to hold her in place. It like leg straps her. They're flying. She sees someone fall off another dragon, and the dragon does not catch him. They fly down to the flight field, and he basically bows a leg to let her slide off. So she like slides down his leg on her butt. She asks why he chose her, and he says, because you saved her. She spews things about dragons like, this is what dragons choose and what they value. And he tells her, please, do tell me more about what I should value. And he tells her, I know exactly who and what you are, Violet Sorengale. You are the smartest of your year, the most cunning. I gulp at the compliment, brushing it off. I was trained as a scribe, not a writer. You defended the smallest with ferocity. And strength of courage is more important than physical strength, since you apparently need to know before we land. She tells the Golden One that she is happy that she made it, because after they land, Andarna is like, hello, here I am, and that she should fly away and save herself. She blinks, and Andarna says, maybe I was saving you. Her voice is higher and sweeter in my mind. Didn't anyone tell you you're not supposed to speak to humans who aren't your writer? Don't go get yourself in trouble, Goldie, I whisper. From what I hear, dragons are pretty strict about breaking that rule. She heads to the roll to go tell the roll keeper her dragon's name. Her mom is there, and Kaori is staring open mouth at Terran, memorizing every detail of him since he hasn't seen him in 5 years. Is that really? Commandant Panchek starts, hovering at the edge of the dais with more than a dozen other uniformed, high-ranking officers, all gaping. Don't say it, Mom hisses. Her eyes on Terran, not me, not until she does. Because only the writer and the roll keeper know a dragon's full name, and she's not certain. I'm really his. That's exactly what she's implying. Like I'd be able to hijack Terran. Anger simmers in my veins, overtaking the pain coursing through my body. She walks up to the roll keeper. She's like, Terran's name, Terran's line, and then she hears, and Andarna Urim, and she's like, are you fucking kidding me? And she's like, all right, hey, guess what? I bonded 2 dragons, and then all hell breaks loose. Chapter 16. Epigraph. Though this officer considers himself an expert on all matters dragonkind, there is a great deal we don't know about the way dragons govern themselves. There is a clear hierarchy amongst the most powerful, and deference is paid to elders, but I have not been able to discern how it is they make laws for themselves, or at what point a dragon decided to bond only 1 rider, rather than go for better odds with 2. Colonel Kaori's Field Guide to Dragonkind. The generals scream each other for over half an hour while she's in the healer's tent, and Kaori asks her how her ankle is, and she tells him it hurts. And he's talking about them strengthening bonds and riding in the next few months, so her ankle should heal unless she wants him to call Nolan, and she's like, no. When he asks if she's sure, she says, every eye in this valley is on me and my dragons. I can't afford to appear weak. She asks who from her squad has made it, and he says he hasn't seen Trina or Tynan. She says Tynan won't be coming, and he's like, okay. But she feels guilty, and Taryn's like, you do not get the credit for that kill. Thank you, bitch. She hears that Jack is going to have to have surgery on her shoulder. I wrote LOL. She looks Jack straight in those evil eyes and smiles. I'm done being scared of him. Jack is rage-filled, and he's like, you. And she goes, I what? And he goes, and Professor Kaori is like, you? And she's like, me. Jack is like, I wouldn't get any, and Professor Kaori is like, I wouldn't get any closer to her. She doesn't need to hide behind me when the dragon she's bonded to is the most powerful dragon of your year. And he's like, your orange is a good choice, Barlow. Bade, right? He's had 4 other riders before you. As aggressive as Bade might be, from the way Terran's looking at you, he'll have no problem scorching your bones into the earth if you take another step towards his rider. Kaori tells her she's the only one to ever bond 2 dragons, and that it's not up to the generals if she gets to have more than 1 dragon. The dragons will be meeting to discuss it. She walks towards them, and Terran's like, she's like, they're not going to let us do this. And Terran's like, it's up to the Empyrean to decide. Tells her, don't leave the field. This may take a while. And he tells her, I don't know where he tells her. Oh, yes. All the dragons start heading towards the center of the field. She asks, is that? And Terran says, Coda. General Melgren's dragon. He comes close and growls low in his throat, turning his sinister eyes on Violet. Terran tells her, stay close to the wing leader until we return. She's like, surely he meant squad leader? And he's like, you heard what I said. Her friends run over, and she tells Ree that the cut on her arm is from Tynan's sword. Ree tells her that she bonded the green daggertail Fierg. And Ridoc bonded Atrum, brown swordtail, and Sawyer bonded Sleeg, red swordtail. And they're all happy hugging, and Sawyer saw Trina fall. And Violet tells them about Tynan when Dane shows up and ruins all of their cuddling fun. He tells her that the dragons are holding a meeting of the Empyrean and to stay here until they return. Tells them. Dane tells them that the dragons are currently holding a meeting of the Empyrean and to stay there until they return. And then he's like, Violet, come with me. And Dane tells her he has to choose Andarna. She's the safest choice. If she takes Andarna into battle, there's only a chance that she'll get killed. She said, and he says, if you take Taryn, Xaden will get you killed. And she's like, why? And this is where we learn that Xaden and Tagail? Nope. Sagail and Taryn are a mated pair. They are the strongest mated pair, bonded pair in centuries, which I don't agree with. We'll get into that in Iron Flame. And she realizes mated pairs can't be separated for long, so they're stationed together forever, meaning she will be stuck with Xaden forever. He says, don't you see what happened, what Xaden's done? His grip tightens. Thank the gods for dragon scale armor, or I might have bruises tomorrow. So he's squeezing you hard enough to leave bruises. Anyway, Xaden appears. Please do tell me what it is you think I've done. He emerges from the shadows. It's a good time. Xaden steps into the moonlight, darkness falling off of him like a discarded veil. He says, you manipulated threshing. And Dane's like, did you step in? Xaden's like, did I what? Glaring at Dane with a look that would make a lesser person with her. Did I see her outnumbered and already wounded? Did I think her bravery was as admirable as it was fucking reckless? He turns his stare on me, and I feel the impact all the way to my toes. And I would do it again. I raise my chin. Well, the fuck aware, Xaden roars, losing his temper for the first time since I met him on Parapet. I pull in a quick breath, and Xaden does the same, as if he's just as shocked by his outburst as I am. Did I see her fight off 3 bigger cadets? His glare pivots to Dane, because the answer to all of those is yes. But you're asking the wrong question, Atos. What you should be asking is if Sagail saw it too. Dane swallows and looks away, obviously rethinking his position. His mate told him, I whisper. Sigale called for Taryn. She's never been a fan of bullies, Xaden says to me, but don't mistake it as an act of kindness towards you. She's fond of the little dragon. Unfortunately, Taryn chose you all on his own. Fuck, Dane mutters. My thought exactly. Xaden shakes his head at Dane. Sorengale is the last person on the continent I'd ever want to be chained to me. I didn't do this. Ouch. It takes all my willpower in my body not to reach for my chest and make sure he didn't just rip my heart out from behind my ribs, which makes absolutely zero sense, since I feel the same way about him. He's the son of the great betrayer. And out of curiosity, would you have, let's say, bent those rules to save your precious little Violet in that field? Xaden's voice ices over as he studies Dane's expression with rapt fascination. Xaden had taken a step. Right before Taryn landed, he'd moved towards me. Dane's jaw flexes, and I see the war in his eyes. That's unfair to ask him. She moves to Dane's side. And the dragons are flying back. Xaden's like, I'm ordering you to answer, squad leader. And he says, no, I wouldn't have. And he's like, it would have killed me to watch you die, Vi, but the rules. She's like, it's all right. And Xaden's like, the dragons are returning. Get back in formation, squad leader. And she turns on Xaden and says, why would you do that to him? And then she's like, forget it. And he says, because you put too much faith in him. And knowing who to trust is the only thing that will keep us alive. Not only in the quadrant, but after graduation. She says, there is no us. And he says, oh, I think you'll find that's no longer the case. He grips her elbow and yanks her out of the path of another rider running from the other direction. Yesterday, he would have let her run headfirst into him. Hell, he might have even pushed me. Taryn's bonds are so powerful, both to mate and rider, because he's so powerful. Losing his last rider nearly killed him, which in turn nearly killed Sigale. Mated pairs' lives are interdependent. I know that. We move. Each time a dragon chooses a rider, the bond is stronger than the last, which means that if you die violence, it sets off a chain of events that potentially ends with me dying too. So yeah, unfortunately for everyone involved, there is now an us, if the Empyrean lets Taryn's choice stand. And she's like, oh God, I'm connected to Xaden forever. And now that Taryn is in play, the other cadets know he's willing to bond, he sighs, annoyance rippling over his features. That's why Taryn told me to stay with you, I whisper, as the consequences of today's actions settle in my churning stomach, because of the unbonded. There are at least 36 of them, standing on the opposite side of the field, watching us with avarice in their eyes, including Oren Seifert. The unbonded are going to try to kill you in hopes that they'll get Taryn to bond them. Xaden shakes his head at Garrick as he approaches, and the section leader is like, okay. And then he turns around and starts walking away. Taryn is one of the strongest dragons on the continent, and the vast power he channels is about to be yours. The next few months, the unbonded will try to kill a newly paired bonded rider while the bond is weak, and while they still have a chance of that dragon changing its mind and picking them, so they're not set back a full year. And for Taryn, they'll do just about anything. There are 41 unbonded riders for which you are now target number 1. He holds up a single finger. And Taryn thinks you'll play bodyguard? Little does he know just how much you dislike me. He knows exactly how much I value my own life, Xaden retorts. You're freakishly calm for someone who just heard she's about to be hunted. She's like, it's a typical Wednesday for me, my guy. The dragons come, and she tells him, and honestly, being hunted by 41 people is a lot less intimidating than constantly watching dark corners for you. And Zane's like, ha ha ha. Lilith gives her welcome to the family speech. And so we get, Dane comes back, and he's like, Violet, you get to keep them both. He lost her back, and she hisses in pain, and as riders on both of her sides cry out, my back feels like it's on fucking fire. And Taryn says, you'll like it. And Andarna says, it's unique. She's like, I'll like what? And Dane's like, in the road. So Taryn says, tell the boy to move. And she's like, Taryn says you should move. And suddenly she's looking through Andarna's eyes. And she sees that on her back is a glistening black relic of a dragon, mid-flight, stretching from shoulder to shoulder. And in the center of the silhouette is a little golden dragon. She says, it's beautiful. And Andarna says, we know. And then Dane kisses her, and then his mouth is on mine. His lips are soft, but the kiss is firm, and delight races up my spine. After years, Dane is finally kissing me. The thrill is gone in less than a heartbeat. There's no heat, no energy, no sharp slice of lust. Disappointment sours the moment, but not for Dane. He's all smiles as he pulls away. And we have reached the end of part 1. I decided to split this up into before threshing and after threshing, because that's kind of how things are. So in the first part, you learn about the world, and you get to learn about the squad, and you get to know everybody, and you get to learn about the whole world, and you immerse yourself. Before threshing happens, and then boom, we're dragon riders, my guys. So join me next time for part 2. Thanks for coming. I will see you next time for Fourth Wing part 2.